It's Friday, the 26th of May, 2023.
This is the Podnews Weekly Review. Live at the podcast show in London with James Cridland and Sam Sethi.
I'm James Cridland, the editor of Podnews.
And I'm Sam Sethi, the CEO of Podfans.
In the chapters today, YouTube's RSS ingestion. What a complete ranker. The UK to get the Edison podcast ranker. Podcasting coming to Twitter again, kind of. And also... Hello, we're the audience. They are, and we'll be asking people here what they think too. This podcast is sponsored and hosted by Buzzsprout, podcast hosting made easy with powerful tools, remarkable customer support at buzzsprout.com, and by Podnews Live, where podcasting connects on June the 13th in Salford. Learn more and buy tickets at podnews.net/live.
Live from the Amplify Theatre at the podcast show, this is the Podnews Weekly Review.
So, James, let's kick this off then. YouTube, they were here. Oh, yeah. Did you see them?
Were they?
They were, well, she was here briefly, said nothing and left. But you've got an exclusive, or you had an exclusive, which upset them, that they're going to be ingesting RSS or digesting RSS. We don't know which way. What's going on?
Yes, I'm not sure it necessarily upset them, but yes, we at Podnews obtained a document with full details of how RSS will work for YouTube.
Not just RSS on its own, then?
No. But RSS will work in YouTube. They're running a pilot with some partners. We were sent a document that explains how all of that works. And I think a lot of us were expecting RSS to work in the same way that RSS works with Spotify. You give Spotify or Apple Podcasts your RSS feed, and then they take the audio every time somebody asks for it from your podcast host. But no, that's not how it's going to work. YouTube doesn't offer a pass-through like that. They basically grab your audio once, and then that's basically it. And as they say, your hosting company cannot see how many times a podcast episode was listened to on YouTube, because all podcast content on YouTube is hosted on YouTube.
So, okay, if that's the case, I mean, I can see why they want to get content. Does this mean that all hosts are going to be made redundant if YouTube successfully ingest every podcast?
Well, I mean, what's the point of a podcast host, I guess, if if YouTube will host all of the podcast audio? What's the point of a podcast host? And actually, YouTube are also saying that podcasts can't contain any ads. So regular ads are not allowed to be uploaded to YouTube. We request feeds to be ad-free. So sponsored segments like this is fine, as long as we manually mark it as such. And obviously, for the last 2 years, we have been manually marking this podcast as containing a sponsor credit, obviously. So we've got to do that as well. But no adverts in there as well.
So they're trying to say that they have every other advantage. They have advertising, comment systems. So in some ways you can see their point of view. Are they going to be the new Facebook, or are they going to be the new Spotify?
Well, are they going to be? Yes, it'll be interesting. Are you basically saying, are they going to be the new Facebook? Will it crash and burn, and will they go away? Or will it be Spotify, where they might be vaguely successful?
Well, it's Google, isn't it? I mean, look, the Google graveyard is ridiculously full. I mean, it's got more people in there than anyone else. Think of a product and it's dead. So yeah. I guess my opinion is YouTube will get bored. It won't be $1 billion business. They'll get bored. They'll lean back into Mr. Beast, and that'll be it. Because they've said nothing at 3 events, right? Kai in Las Vegas,
yes,
waste of space, waste of time. Kai here, waste of space, waste of time. And I'm sorry, Alison, here, waste of space, waste of time.
She was very nice. She came over
lovely,
very well.
Lovely lady. I'm not knocking her.
And she gave us a name credit.
A nod.
A name credit, which was very good. Now, listen, there are lots of people here, and you are the guest, of course, don't forget. So what does anybody else here think about YouTube and about YouTube's RSS? Stick your hand up and be the first to talk, because I'm just really wondering whether or not I've just got the wrong end of the stick. There's a gentleman on the front row.
Hi, I'm Bobby Temps. It worries me to think about, because I'm thinking in terms of uploading my show and the work that normally goes into that, and we have ads that are dropped in automatically by Audio Boom. So would this potentially mean we need to have a second version of the show.
Completely.
On top of already having the subscriber version of the show with Apple Podcasts. So then I've got 3 versions of the show.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from my reading of what YouTube is saying, yeah, they don't want any ads, so they want an ad-free version. Now, quite a lot of podcast hosting companies will give you that. I was chatting with Omni Studio yesterday. I don't know why I'm giving them a plug. They're not here. But they were saying that they can very easily give you an ad-free version for uploading onto YouTube. So perhaps that might be the way that you end up doing it. But yeah, perhaps if you're doing baked-in ads, you will have to edit those out, which I think will be a little bit of fun. There's another question, I think, from Neville Hobson over there.
Hello, James. Hello, Sam.
Hey.
Neville Hobson, I'm a podcast host and producer.
For many years, by the way, for many years.
Yeah, nearly 20, actually. So, interesting. I read your piece in Podnews and listened to how you've explained it. It's quite well. So, if I understand it right, they are centralizing all of this. The previous questioner asked about uploading the show twice. That's what it looks like to me. What are they trying to do with this, do you think? Is it precisely that, a land grab? Are they, I mean, already I know a number of podcasts, audio podcasts, that are hosted on YouTube because people tend to like to watch static images while they listen, or there's multiple reasons why they wouldn't, but the reach is quite huge for many. Is this going to replace that? Is this like a new service coming in? So your point about RSS is equally intriguing because they are trying to do something that disrupts the system that's worked for 20 plus years, basically. So I don't think this is something that podcasters should be pleased about, it seems to me. What are your thoughts on that point?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of what you said there. It does seem that it is very different to the way that podcasting has worked for the last 20 years, and caching audio. A few people have tried that in the past. You may remember Luminary, who were caching audio until people found out and jumped up and down and said, please stop. And a very early version of the Stitcher app did the same thing, but that was 15 years or so ago. So I wonder whether or not that's likely, whether or not people are going to be upset about that. But of course, that's how YouTube works, I guess, is the main thing. There's another, yeah.
Hi, my name is Kyle. I lead on podcasts for the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, which is a mouthful. We make about 14 shows. And
sounds exciting.
You have no idea. And my podcasters are asking, should we bother with YouTube? And my response is, when they start doing podcasting, yes, but not right now. I'm more concerned with how many different interpretations of the word podcast we have to worry about, rather than how many different versions of shows we have to upload. So at the moment, we're not touching it.
Sam, what's a podcast?
Well, technically something that's got an RSS feed in it.
But what's really a podcast?
Ooh, I don't know. I now feel like I'm under pressure. But the reality is, I think you should be pushing your data in there. I mean, look, at the moment, there is a lot of we don't knows, right? And I think at the moment, if you're looking to monetize and gain reach, why wouldn't you? If you don't have to do what the gentleman has to do, which is change the content, it's just another directory reach, right? I mean, the numbers that you'll get, I think, are going to be extremely low. I think next week we'll be able to talk about a couple of companies that are actually now going to make it so that chapter art actually appears and moves and things like that. So maybe that sort of static image in YouTube will become more dynamic. But equally, one of the things I keep trying to get several podcasters who do both YouTube, who do audio and video podcasts is to use the alternative enclosure tag. And I think that is beholden on hosts to support that sooner, quicker and better, because that's the only way that you're going to take a behemoth like YouTube that is fundamentally, as Neville said, trying to suck RSS content in one way into a black hole and not allow it out the other way. And I think, we can sit here and pontificate and decry what Spotify and YouTube do, but actually proprietary companies have been doing this for years and they will continue to because it's market share and gain.
Well, let's move on. The next story here is what a total ranker. I was hoping that would get more of a laugh earlier on. Thanks.
It's the way you sell it.
Yeah, that's clearly it.
So at the podcast show here in London, it was announced that Edison podcast metrics are coming to the UK, James. unpack that. What is Edison and why is that exciting for the UK?
So I live in Australia these days, and Australia has a podcast ranker, the Australian podcast ranker. If you look into the US, there are a couple of different podcast rankers there. There's a podcast ranker in Canada. There's one in Belgium. They're all over the place.
Don't have to say it like that, James.
I was just trying to make Belgium sound more exciting.
That's true.
But there's never been a podcast ranker here in the UK, which has been a real missed opportunity, I think. And I'm thrilled that Edison Podcast Metrics is going to be running a podcast ranker here, because for the first time we'll actually know what the biggest shows are in this country, which should be a good thing, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, why haven't we had it here before? What else is in place currently that gives any sort of metric analysis?
Well, so I think if you look at why, it's just purely no one. There are two ways of doing a podcast ranker, right? One of the ways is something like Podtrack or Triton, where you, as a publisher, sign up to share your details with that particular ranker. And then they go and they compile the ranker from all of your details, so participating publishers only, essentially. And then there's the other way, which Edison is doing, which is asking lots of podcast listeners what podcasts they're listening to, in the same way that TV ranking works, radio ratings works, and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's what Edison Podcast Metrics are going to be doing. I tell you what I found really interesting. They published 5 shows that they said were in the top 5, but we're not going to tell you what order. There wasn't anything from the BBC there at all.
Is that because they're not included, or they just don't rank?
They're included. Because everybody's included. You can't opt out of the Edison Podcast Metrics ranker. So they're included. So everybody, I think, has grown up in this country thinking the BBC is number 1. The BBC is clearly the most listened to podcast publisher. But they're not there, which I thought was really interesting.
So doing your best DJ impersonation, what were the top 5?
Of the 2 that I remember, and maybe there are people in the audience who know, just saying, put your hand up if you feel that you can talk. The 2 that I remember, Joe Rogan Experience, as you would kind of expect, they're quite often number 1 in Spotify here, and also The Rest is Politics, which is one of the podcasts that I listen to. Are we excited about a podcast ranker? Are we excited about seeing who's going to who the number 1 is and who maybe the top 25 in the future are going to be in this country, or are we there going we're not particularly interested? I think there's a man who might know a few more about this. Could you perhaps tell us who you are and who the top 5 were?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Soto, Senior Director of Edison Research.
Hooray.
We are the people here that are, providing this ranker, this tool to the UK, and we're very excited about it. Top 5 shows, James, and hi, Sam. Top 5 shows, the Joe Rogan Podcast, not in any particular order, the Joe Rogan Podcast, The Diary of a CEO, Off Menu, Shagged, Married, and Annoyed. And then The Rest is Politics. You got that one. Yep.
Yes. I love the way that you said shagged, married, and annoyed in your American accent. That really works.
Shagged, married, and annoyed.
But I'm super excited about it because it is the first ranker in this country. How has you only announced it at 9:30 this morning, or even earlier? How has the reaction been?
Yeah, you're pretty fast in the news, James. It's been good. I think a lot of people were expecting some of those shows. We've spoken to a lot of people who have been involved in the industry for a while. Some are surprised, but it's also very comforting to know that a lot of people got some of those shows correctly. Those were some of the shows that people expected.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with that. Gabriel, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Good financial news, Sam.
Well, it's back down under home for you, James. The IAB report that podcast ad revenue saw a 20.7% annual growth, but against that, it saw a decline of total online ad revenue by 0.8%. So unpack all of that for us.
Yeah, so basically online ad revenue in total in Australia is down ever so slightly, or as their press release would say, stable. And podcast ad revenue is up by 20.7% annual growth. And I think that's what we've been seeing all over the place. We've been seeing that the ad business is in decline, but that podcast ad revenue is actually doing a greater piece of work there. Some really nice research that came out as well in the US today from Acast, which was talking about return on investment. And most podcast advertisers, they say, I think from memory, 85%, something like that, say that they see more than double their return on investment on podcast advertising, which is really good. And 20% of podcast advertisers say that they see more than $6 back for every $1 that they spend, which is quite a thing, and the highest of any tested medium. I mean, radio has, I think, three.
Yeah, I was going to ask against radio or TV, how does that measure up? But okay. But on a negative side for Acast, slightly, Gold Hanger Podcasts, the rest is politics, as we just talked about, has switched to Spotify's Megaphone and the Spotify Audience Network from Acast. Why have they done that?
Well, you're probably best asking them, but I think...
I did, actually.
What did
I can't tell you. No, I'm joking. No, I didn't see Jack, actually. I saw Dino from Postphonica. Again, I think they're getting courted. And if you're courted and you're getting better offers, you may move.
Yeah, and certainly the rest is politics, the rest is history, and a number of their other shows doing really, really well. People are, moving to Spotify's Megaphone and the Spotify Audience Network. Spotify taking over a little bit more of this, and a very confusing announcement from the BBC. The BBC is going to be working with Spotify's Megaphone, but in the UK only. And they're not using them for ads or anything like that. They're using them for essentially program trailers. So they will be recommending relevant content to audiences. If you're listening to a BBC podcast on Apple Podcasts, for example, then Spotify's Megaphone will be scheduling the trailers there. So that you know what other BBC programming you might wish to enjoy on there as well, which is quite canny from the BBC, who clearly don't have that tech for themselves, but it doesn't affect the BBC's deal with Acast. So Acast supports the BBC's podcasts with advertising outside the UK. According to the little jingle that comes up every single time. So that's good news from them. Do we have to talk about Elon Musk?
No, okay, I'll move on. It'll be a really short show. I said that carefully. Now, Lex Friedman tweeted that he wants to see podcasting come to Twitter. In response to that, Elon Musk said that, why don't you use Twitter Spaces and then record it? Ron DeSantis made his presidential announcement today on Twitter Spaces.
Oh, good.
And but funnily enough, Jason Calacanis, who's a close friend of Elon Musk, said Twitter is going to win at podcasting. Several other people, Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, will be distributing on Twitter, according to some reports. And it looks like Periscope, which was that old piece of code, if you remember that, before TikTok. That's what they're dusting down and bringing back. If you've got a blue check marker as well, you can now put up to, I think it's
two hours or something, or 2 gigs worth of video or something ridiculous, which I think why the Ben Shapiro show and other quality pieces of content such as that are being now uploaded, because they can now upload a very large file, on there.
And so we don't know 100%, but we believe that it's going to be an RSS ingestion as well. And also there's a micro format payments. Now, Jack left Lightning payments and Bitcoin payments in the code. I don't know if, like Periscope, they're going to dust that down. But the other part of that is obviously Dogecoin may be the use of payment as well.
Excellent. Well, that's what we need. Is anybody here going to use Twitter to listen to podcasts? There's quite a lot of no's. There was a hand that went up and then very, very quickly went down towards the back. I'm trying to work out whether that was, oh my God, no. Put your hand down.
But my question, James, is why? Again, if you're going to use YouTube to reach for distribution, same argument applies to Twitter, therefore. It's a distribution medium. They're trying to turn it into a right-wing medium, by the way. You've heard of that ex-Fox host who's coming to do his show there, haven't you?
No.
Tucker Carlson's going to be announced.
Oh, yeah, okay. Right,
so
yes.
I think you're beginning to see that the way forward for Elon Musk is to turn Twitter back into some sort of right-wing media company. It was interesting as well, just noting, and we should get back to podcasting, but DeSantis announced on Twitter and not on Fox, and Murdoch must be very, very upset.
Yes, he must be.
But in the same way, you've got comments, you'll have payments. Why wouldn't you place your episodes and podcast on Twitter?
Yeah. I mean, do we think that Twitter is a good distribution medium for putting our podcasts up on there? If we could manage that, there's someone that's put their hand up. So either agrees or doesn't agree in the front row.
As an indie podcast, hi, my name's Craig. As an indie podcast, I don't really care where my content is, and it's the same answer as the YouTube question. As long as people are listening, I don't use programmatic advertising, so I wouldn't be affected. And presumably, if the listeners like the content, they'll be directed to my website. So I really don't care as long as they're listening.
Yeah, that's a good view to have. I think I don't care as long as they listen would be a good plan. There's a question right at the back over there. I mean, I guess it's whether or not you agree with the predominant amount of the content on that particular system. But yeah.
Hi, James. Hi, Sam. I would basically say the same thing. I've become platform agnostic. So my behaviors are I'll watch Impulsive on YouTube. I'll listen to Podnews weekly on whatever app I happen to press first. I'll listen to Call Her Daddy on Spotify. So if there was a creator that I liked and they were posting on Twitter, that wouldn't bother me at all. So I can totally see why that's a play. This domination of I listen to all my podcasts in one place, I just don't see how that's sustainable.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Talking about Spotify, Sam?
Yes. So just an observation, James.
This is Sam's Spotify joke. Please pay attention.
It's not a joke, it's an observation. I walked around the whole hall here. Every stand is open. It's lovely, it's embracing and warm. There's only one stand here, James, that is closed, roped off and secluded. Which stand was that?
I think it was Spotify.
Strangely Spotify, yes. Very unwelcoming on their stand. Now, Spotify have also added that they are going to be doing AI ads. So maybe we could get Joe Rogan to do an ad for this show. Spotify reportedly are developing bots to mimic your favorite hosts. It came from Bill Simmons, the founder of Ringer, who basically sold his company to Spotify for close to 200 million in 2022. Spotify AI ads, James, excited, useful, going to start to use them, all of the above?
I mean, I think if you are going to have an AI voice, which is essentially, Joe Rogan's AI voice, but he says, hey, Sam, it's time for you to eat this weird dietary supplement. I think, yeah, but you can see from their point of view, well, that's going to make it easier for brands to buy, and maybe it might be a more interesting listen for you. But on the other side, it does seem to devalue the whole point of a host-read podcast ad to me. So I'm kind of slightly nervous about it, to be honest. What do you think?
No, I think they're not going to be very useful. I think they'll be entertaining to begin with. I think, having a famous voice do it to start off with will be fun. And then after a while, we'll lose the value because, as you say, the value is in the actual believing of the product that you're trying to sell. If you want to know more about this, there is on Spotify, Lenny's podcast interviews their CTO, Gustav Sonderstrom, about the product, their use of AI, and where they actually, a product you dislike a lot, their music and their AI DJ, and how they're going to evolve that further to remove radio, basically, in their opinion.
Yeah, it's a great listen and worthwhile. The podcast is called Lenny's Podcast, and presumably it's by a man called Lenny.
The tech stuff on the Podnews Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Podnews newsletter. Here's where we do all of the tech stuff. A new podcast data website has been launched. It's at podcastdata.org, and it allows users to query the podcast index in a user-friendly way with extra data that we computed, according to the website owner. The website owner at the moment seems to be holding a very expensive camera, which is very good. But it's definitely worthwhile a peek. Podcastdata.org is the website address.
So what's the extra data, James? Or should we just ask Benjamin as he's here?
Well, should we ask Benjamin as he's here? Why not?
So basically, what we're trying to do here is to provide an easy way to see what's on the podcast index. You may know what podcastindex.org is. It's basically an index for podcasts, hence podcast index. There are 4 million podcasts in it, and it's open data, meaning you can download the whole dump of the database. But what will you do with the database dump? Well, not very easy to query and to see what it means. So what we're trying to do here is to provide a nice way of seeing how many podcasts were published, how many episodes, in which language, on what platform, and to make it as useful as possible.
Yeah, no.
So that in the end we can promote the podcast index and use it. We know that some podcasts aren't in it, and some distribution company aren't using it, and it should be because it's free, and it's free as in free beer and as in free speech. And of course, then it would allow to promote podcasting 2.0. You mentioned, Sam, alternate enclosure earlier. There are many features that the podcast index allows, translation, transcription, and many geolocation, many stuff. So this is a way of showing what can be done with the podcast index.
Yeah.
So far, just charts and analytics, and we'll add a semantic query interface soon.
Yeah, it's really cool. If you've ever wanted to take a look at the podcast index data, then you could be like me and play around with your own SQL database, or you can be like a normal human being and use your website. So thank you so much for that. Other things going on this week. Albi has partnered with Castomatic, so they've switched the value for value wallet that they've been using. Mike Cadin from Red Circle was on the Podcasting 2.0 podcast last week, which was very good, which I listened to as I was wandering around London earlier on. And Maxime Piquet, the CEO of OSHA, is talking about using AI in every step of podcast creation, which sounds really interesting. Is there any chance that we can get him on?
Strangely, I met up with him here, had a beer, and yes, he'll be on next week to talk about how they're using AI. Now, a lot of people have asked about where AI and podcasting will cross over. This is the first example of possibly one of them. I mean, I know Descript's been using AI and there are other platforms, but this is really interesting. I saw a demo of it, so yeah, we'll talk more about that one next week.
Excellent. Well, that should be really good. Let's take a look at some events, given that we're sitting in an event. The next one I'm going to is Radio Days North America, which is in Toronto in early June. And then there is a thing called Podcast Live in Manchester, well, really in Salford, on June the 13th. That's in the north of England. Why should people go, Sam?
Well, okay, so this all started off with talking to a number of podcast producers, Mark Asquith from Captivate, Mark Carr from Audio Works, and various others. And we were saying, look, why are you all having to come down here to this show? This was last year. Why don't we take the mountain to Mohammed? And technically we said, yeah, let's do an event up there. It's a B2B event. It's a show and tell. So each of the 13 different companies that are going to be presenting there will tell you what they're doing. James and I will do a Q&A, and an audience will do a Q&A. And so the event that we're doing up there is our first ever one. We're just going to see, what's going on in the industry. And we hope
how much of a disaster it's going to be. That's what we're going to
see. Okay. We're doing another one on the 25th in Barcelona. So we've got some great companies there. And then we're doing one on the 27th here in London. So Ross Adams is coming from Acast and Morten Strungen from Podimo. So
that's the 25th and the 27th of September. You'll find out more details there, podnews.net/live. Also, the other big events coming up, Podcast Movement in August from the 21st to the 24th in Denver in Colorado. Quick show of hands. In fact, no, because it won't work on a podcast. Quick cheer. Are you going to the Podcast Movement? There you go. There was a yes and a maybe. There you go, Dan. You're okay. And then Radio Days Asia, which I would heartily recommend. It's at the beginning of September. It's in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. If you want to walk outside and feel as if you're in a shower, that's the place to be because it's that moist. I just used the word moist in a podcast. I get extra points. And you can find out more about that. RadioDaysAsia.com. More events, both paid for and free at Podnews. Virtual events, or events in a place with people. And if you're organising something, it's free to tell the world about it at podnews.net/events.
Boostergram Corner on the Podnews Weekly Review.
Now, this is our favourite time of the week, Sam. Would you like to explain what a boostergram is?
So boostergram, very simply, is a comment with a micro payment attached to it. That is all it is. So instead of giving comments and not giving any value back to the hosts or creators, now with a boostergram, you can actually give them a little bit of micro payment to say, thank you very much.
Yes, a little bit of money, as these people have. Dave Jones sent us 40,000 sats. Now, 40,000 sats is £9. That's a decent amount of money, isn't it? And Dave says, great lineup of interviews. He's talking about last week's 2.5-hour version. You guys have a great time at the London show. Here's some beer money. So half of beer for me.
I was going to say, how was your beer? Because I don't think Dave understands how expensive beer is in this country.
Yes, there is always that. Who else have we got boosts from?
Brian from Top Tier Audio. While Value for Value isn't rolled out into the new release of Creator Tools, Captivate does support streaming Satoshis and other podcasting 2.0 RSS feed enhancements. They do support feed enhancements, but how they support streaming Satoshis, unless they're doing that manually, I'm not quite sure. So maybe we can ask Mark later.
Maybe we can. 1,701 sats. I've got no idea whether that's a special amount of sats. Brian, thank you for that. 10,000 sats, which, by the way, is about £2, from the podfather himself, Adam Curry. I'm not sure I understand his message at all. But...
Oh, I do, yes.
Yeah?
So eventually we'll have to move to microsats.
Brilliant.
I believe. Now, the problem is that a number of people, like in Adam Curry's feed, have got 12 splits, right? He's got 105% and 12 splits. Totally wrong in both cases. And, of course, when you try and do that, you end up with 2.5 sats to somebody.
Oh, I see.
And
okay.
Currently...
And sats being the currency of this money that comes in.
So now you have to work out: do I give 2 to James, 4 to Sam, or 3 and 6 and whatever? And it just doesn't work. Microsats do exist for anyone who's aware, except they've not been taken up by the podcasting community yet, so they may well have to.
Yes. I sense the audience getting restless. 4,096 sats. That's 4K boost. I know that one. From somebody who hasn't given their name. I enjoyed hearing Martin and Oscar talking about how their apps are progressing. So Oscar Merry, who works at Fountain, is one of the podcast apps which allows you to send things like boosts. And it's a very good app, and it's done here in Shoreditch, the land of the Bitcoin ATM. So it's well worth giving that a go, fountain.fm. Another 10,000 sat boost from Adam Curry.
We have now got 2 beers.
Just saying, oh, yes, we do, yes. Saying, lots of laughs, all good, Sam, we love you. Why?
Because I basically cocked up last week, or the week before, when I interviewed Sharon Taylor, and Adam wasn't happy because I said the podcast namespace was now the Podcast Standards Project.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
I like to forget. Thanks for reminding me, James.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then a couple more messages. One from I Love Sushi. Okay. So exciting to learn more about Fountain Apps transcripts from Oscar Merry, which was in our interview last week. This gave me lots of new ideas on how I can use this feature. I always learn useful information from this podcast and look forward to it every week. Well, thank you. Nick Malster from Fountain, go podcasting. Looking forward to hanging out with you both next week. And
we'll be going for drinks after this then, Nick.
And Medus?
I'll go Medus.
Okay. Keep up the good work. 15,000 sats, which is an excellent thing, which is about £3. Keep up the good work. Listen to me talking about quid. as if
You're back. Yeah. You're back.
I'm back. I'm back home. If you get value from what we do, the Podnews Weekly Review is separate from Podnews. Sam and I share everything from it. We really appreciate your support. You can support this show in many different ways, but one of them is to become a power supporter at weekly.podnews.net. If you like Tim Apple, then you can subscribe in Apple Podcasts, apple.co/podnews, or support us with sats by hitting that boost button in your podcast app. So, what's happening for you this week and next week, Sam?
So, a big thank you to everyone who came to our drinks on Tuesday night at the Castle Inn. A few more than we thought. It was very sunny and very packed, but very entertaining.
If you weren't invited, by the way, you can blame Sam.
Thanks.
So yes, that's the thing.
This morning I did a presentation to a couple hundred people over at the old BBC Media Centre at Soho House on the good, the bad and the ugly of AI. That was very interesting. And that's going to be the venue for our Podnews Live in September here in London as well.
That's very exciting. So old TV Centre. Will we be? We won't be.
Your office is probably now the toilets.
I mean, frankly, I think it already was. No, I never worked out of the TV centre. I worked out of the larger building, which they've since demolished. But yes, so that should be really exciting. Looking forward to going over there as well. You've added something about Bitcoin Pizza Day.
Yeah, this week it was on May the 22nd, Bitcoin Pizza Day, the day that a certain gentleman decided to agree to pay 10,000 bitcoins to Papa John's for a pizza to impress his girlfriend.
Oh, yes.
That pizza is now worth £268,770,000 today, or dollars.
Wow. I mean, pounds or dollars, it's much the same, isn't it? So, gosh, there's a thing. Yes.
So don't pay in micropayments either. You never know what that might be worth soon.
Yes. No,
now, James, what's been happening for you this week?
Well, I mean, obviously I've been mostly on planes, but then that's my life these days. I was also talking on this very stage yesterday, which was good fun, talking about focusing on engagement and time spent and defending the unique nature of the open medium. Adam Curry and Dave Weiner got lots of mentions, and I noticed that Dave Weiner and Adam Curry got mentions this morning as well from Gabriel Soto from Edison Research as well, and I think quite rightly. So it's good to see both Adam and Dave's excellent work. And one final question for the audience is: what other story have we not covered in this particular podcast? What other things have you seen happening here that you think, oh wow, this has been something that I wasn't necessarily expecting? Is there anybody with any closing thoughts that you might that anybody might wish to put their hand up and help me fill the 2 minutes that I've got to fill? Come on, there you go. So it's always nice when I have to get desperate
and beg.
So go for it.
Okay, Ian Forrester, BBC R&D. I really would like to see some more technical expertise and some more technical thoughts around podcasting rather than what we have here.
Yeah, so a few more technical sessions in the podcast show London. I will pass that on to the good folks at the podcast show. There's another here.
Yes, I agree with that. I heard a lot about branding and nicey stuff, but when you talk about how do you set up your podcast to produce it, to allow stuff to be stitched into it, the practical stuff, and also perhaps more sessions for publishers who make podcasts from an enterprise level, that would be really good.
Yeah, that's interesting. And certainly there's been an awful lot of people here, and many more than last year, which has been really interesting. Was there another question hiding away at the back? Or have I just made that up? I've just made that up. Super helpful. And that's it for this week.
You can give us feedback using email at weekly@podnews.net.
I don't know why we say that, because no one ever gives us feedback via email. It's like, talking about 1990s technology. Yes.
Okay,
anyway.
Forget all of that then. Just send us a boost. If your podcast app doesn't support boost, then grab a new app at podnews.net/new podcast apps.
Our music is from Studio Dragonfly. Our voiceover is Sheila Deem. Audio mixing this week by Aztec Event Services at The Podcast Show. And we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Podcast hosting made easy.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show. And support us. The Podnews Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.